It's called Faux finishes. I asked him to change that to wood graining, but it was for naught. But there's a little bit of similarity, and there are a few things. There's a mantelpiece over there. It's got some marbling on it. And Faux finishes I think of as decorative, modern things for walls and other kinds of features, so in a house. So. Anyhow, this is the mantelpiece I started with. I did recently. That's the before picture when it was in the basement.
Wow.
And that's the finished installation on the 3rd floor.
Is it oil-based paint?
Now, the mantelpieces were all, they've got a complicated process for doing that. You can't really see. Some of this has a real faint texture of marble. And what they did was they took those individual, and that's like 3 different components. There's a piece of slate on the side, then there's an iron piece that's attached to the side of that that projects out. Then there was a main piece of the mantle with these brackets on it and a top. And what they did was they floated, they had a big tank and they floated oil pigments on there, 3 or 4 different colors, then they dipped that on there like they were making paper, and they got that marble, random marble. It's impossible to reproduce on the wall other than by just drawing it in. So then they painted the stuff black where it's black, or with the gold pinstripes, everything's surrounded. And they did all their little gold pinstriping, and that's just a geometric design. You can take a rule and pick out certain points and start drawing from that. And I've never really seen 2 or 3 that are the same. They're almost all different. They'll be slightly different even from room to room in the mantle. Then they did gold decoration. They used a liner brush, a striping brush with gold paint. But I use paint pens. You can get a really fine paint pen, and it saves you a lot of time. And I'm not a sign painter or a striper can do it, but you really need a maul where you can get a straight line. So they were true craftsmen. So. And the marbling, if I have to recreate that, I use a resist system for paint. I use an oil-based paint with a 1-inch brush, and I do it, or a turkey feather or something, and I get a random line going, and I spritz it with a little bit of alcohol, and it'll separate from the rest of the paint, or the glaze. And I've got quite a few of these. It's kind of repetitious, but that's another before picture. And as you can see, there's large portions of black missing. And the whole thing, the shellac has aged very badly. And if I just wash the whole thing down with denatured alcohol, you'll get back to something you can paint over. You paint in the black portions, add the marbling.
Now, what's that picture in the middle?
It's a little portrait, an oil-based portrait.
How did you clean that? Did you get to clean that too?
I've had to repaint in parts of it that are missing, but basically that's what it looks like after I clean it all with denatured alcohol and isopropyl alcohol, and then I put a little coat of sealer over it to preserve it.
Wow.
Excuse me for my late arrival. I have the exact same mantle in my house.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid to touch it because I don't want to remove any.
Yeah.
Did you say how to clean it, or?
Well, I clean everything gently with a soft cloth and a spritzer with denatured alcohol. Almost all of them are coated with shellac. So, and what happens is that's why that's so darkened and you're losing all the detail is that shellac ages and turns black, especially from the heat and the other oxidation. And if you gently clean it with denatured alcohol, I had to go back in and block in stuff and make marble and do all the gold pinstriping and stuff like that and paint in black backgrounds. But that portrait, really, all I did was clean it with denatured alcohol. It's an oil-based portrait. And then I put a coat of sealer over it. An acrylic sealer.
Acrylic now, yeah.
Yeah.
Mike did my fireplace and did a fantastic job.
You have one of those little paintings in there too?
No.
Oh. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get time to download his. These last 3 fireplaces with those little portraits are all in the same house in different rooms on the 2nd floor. And that's again a before picture. As you can see in the lower corner there, it's rusted, there's portions missing. So again, I go in and I paint in I clean it all with denatured alcohol, get it back to something. You don't want to clean it too far because you will start to take the marbling off and stuff. So you want to at least be able to see what's there to strike it back in your patterns. Then that's after.
No.
What kind of pen or something you said fine point?
The draw pen?
Yeah, it's a paint pen.
Paint pen.
Like that you put your own paint in?
No,
Oh. Oh.
they're commercially available. And you can go to Plaza Art Supplies or Shooters, and they come in oil base, water base, whatever, and they come in different, like down to 0.07,
Yeah.
and that'll draw. They shake them up, they paint them. And that way you can put a straight edge on there and get a nice straight line. I don't have the discipline and have painted signs enough to use only a liner brush. to do
Yeah.
that. Now, occasionally, they're painted all the way over. And you can't really strip something like that. You'll strip your finish off underneath it. So I use some solvents, but for the most part, I take a single edge razor blade, get under the edge somewhere, and I scrape off everything that I can.
Wow.
Now, you can see there's part of the pattern is showing in there. Some of it comes off really good, some of it isn't as good. And that's what it looks like when it's done.
Wow.
So you'll have the pattern that you can match by hand as a fine art restoration almost. And you block in all the stuff to make it look like marble again. I can't really do the process of dipping it and get that same random thing. Paint in the black background, do your gold pin striping. And it's better to make it a process if you're going to do something like that. It can't be an art project. If you look at it too close, it'll look forced. So you want to work out a way to make a couple of different kinds of material, like alcohol and oil or water-based and oil, to resist so that they separate and you get a hard edge to look like marble.
Yeah, that's what I didn't understand, this spritzing to get, what does that
I use,
set it or something?
well, I'll go through. Wood
Okay.
graining is basically the same thing. You use a ground color for your base, which here is black.
Yeah.
And then I would use a couple of different colors of oil, which would be the 2 green and whatever. Usually there's green and red, or this is green and something else, and there's some white in there. And I would blotch that on there, very thin. It's maybe not even paint, it's a glaze with color in it.
Okay.
And blotch that on there and spritz it with alcohol, and it'll resist, it'll separate.
Oh,
So you don't want it on everywhere, and you want it to resist and get a hard edge.
it gets a weird, it gets its own pattern from the.
The resist. And my favorite saying is just walk away. Don't touch it. You can't. Once you start, you can't touch it. And the more random it looks, the better.
Wow.
And then everything else is just black balls. And I coat everything. Usually I end up coating everything with shellac for a finish coat, but it's a little too shiny, so sometimes I'm forced to use there aren't really many acrylic options available unless you use polyurethane like that. Then you can get everything from flat to gloss, and you can get something in between. And I definitely always use polyurethane for the tops because people are going to set a drink there, and shellac would just make a ring.
So it's fine to put, that whole myth of not putting water-based stuff over oil-based stuff, like,
Actually, when you're,
polyurethane is not really water-based.
well, and what polyurethane can only be really a final thing, because once polyurethane's on, you can't add anything else except polyurethane. Nothing else sticks to it. The cross links on the surface there are impervious, that's why they're so serviceable.
But
And
you
you
can
really,
put
but I use an
over
acrylic,
oil.
I use an acrylic glaze, and I'll go through, when I go through graining, you'll see why we do that. So, that's again, this is the same house, different room
Wow.
after. And it looks worse than it is. I mean, it looks really bad here. It's kind of intentional on my part, but you can see that
Yeah.
pattern is
Yeah.
still there.
Mhm.
If you take your time to remove that, I mean, it took me probably 2.5 days to remove it all with a single edge razor blade,
Wow.
and at about 6 hours a day. And then you got to recreate everything and refreshen it. So. But usually there's enough pattern there, even if you're missing a portion of the pattern, you can extrapolate that and measure out your points and draw your lines in and everything.
So it's really restoration, you know, I mean,
It
it's
is
not like nowadays where you do whatever you feel like.
No, it's a fine art restoration.
Yeah, that's cool.
This is a different house and a very different mantle. They're not always marbleized like that. This is in a house on Park Avenue. And that's the actual.
Wow.
And a lot of that was under there. I had to refresh the wood graining and I had to draw in all the gold, do a black background. But the pattern was there and you could see it. So frequently I'll go over that really thinly with black to refresh and everything. Then I use a dewax shellac, a sheet seal coat in between coats. So I might get it to a point where I'm ready to go back in and grain, and I might seal the whole thing so that I start with something fresh.
Because if you didn't, then your brushing on of a new layer would
Right.
sort of melt the one below it.
Right, and you don't want anything muddy there. And the clear coat will actually freshen that up. This is the same house as that previous mantle, but this is the woodwork in the house. So it was all painted white, and that's the color for the ground that I used to make those 19th century pine. You know, it's got all this glowing stuff coming up. And
Yeah.
I actually have to go look at a job next week. They had somebody do it. Whenever the story starts with, well, we were out of town, you know, and somebody tried to put a stain on to match those old pine finishes, and you just can't do it. They were never stained. They were just shellac, and what you're seeing in that nice golden glow is an aged shellac. So you can even recreate it with new modern yellow pine, but you need to use a tinted shellac that you basically pre-age everything and use it in layers. It takes 3 or 4 layers to get it to where you want
How did you get the paint off the woodwork?
it. I didn't take the paint off the woodwork.
You just painted over it?
Yeah, that
You painted that.
all of
mustard color.
these wood grain samples start out as, there's actually a piece back there that's painted yellow. It's behind those.
And you just put it on top of the wood?
Yeah, and I'm going to go through the whole process of how that
That
works.
gets the glow kind of coming through.
Right. You want, the brighter it is underneath. Now, with mahogany, where it's a little more subtle, you might use a salmon color to start with. But for almost everything, I can use that. And at the very end, I can tint my finishes to get to red or brown or whatever. You can add a little green to take the red out. You can add a little red to take the green out. So. But it's almost like putting a gel on a light for film where you want it to look a
So
certain
you
way.
don't recommend removing paint from wood
I wouldn't.
trim?
No, it's a lot longer, much more expensive process.
Good
Plus, I
point.
don't like to do that. So.
Does that even dip anything anymore? I mean, you know, with it, dip it into whatever the horrible solvent.
Yeah, but then you've got a fuzzy, you know, then you're all the way back to an original wood.
Wood, yeah. So.
So, this is a bathroom that was all painted white. This is it. Before and after. And this one.
Yeah.
You start off with that yellow, golden, yellow color underneath.
And that'll give you all that glow.
Yeah,
So,
natural, like you see there.
yeah, there are even a couple of samples back here that I can show you when we get to our wood graining process.
Mhm.
That one has one more step, so to take it where you want to be. This is the same house on Park Avenue. This is a pocket door with woodwork on this dining room, living room. Here's this. This is natural wood in the dining room. It was never painted. This is the painted finish that I did.
Ooh.
And I can tell because these aren't quite as straight, but these aren't straight either. So sometimes I go back and I can't find it. You know, I'll do a repair. I did some stuff in the Hilton in this marble around the. And the busier it is, the easier it is actually, because I can put in all the right colors and then varnish over it.
In your eyes,
And I go back and I have to tap on it to find where it is.
where you did it,
Yeah.
yeah.
But this is, like, say, on the left, that's the natural.
A natural wood, yeah.
But they deliberately grained wood back in the day, right?
Right, and that's what that is. But this is just natural fir, which is in a lot of houses in the East Row, Newport, and everywhere. And I cleaned that all off and just used the tinted shellac to get it to the. Somebody had stripped it, so I sanded it and cleaned it all off. And then I used tinted shellacs to get to the point where. And it's a little redder on that side, so. But again, you have to walk away at some point. Now, since we're still on faux finishes, actually I'll go to here. This is in a building called the American Building on Central Parkway. And the two vents in the wall there are actually in a masonite panel that was in the wall that was originally just painted a solid color. And the surrounding stuff is all what they call Tennessee marble. It's really limestone. But, so I painted in the masonite panels to match the there's a vent there too. So that whole panel, which is 8 feet by 3 feet or whatever. And that was just a really tedious job of, I put a wet glaze on and then I would draw in. And it's book matched there to this. You know, these are book matched, so I had to kind of match the
Yeah.
stuff. And I started out always with a lot of samples of real marble that's book matched, and it's not exactly the same on each side, but if you're doing a panel on the ground, in the floor, or the table, and you're building stuff in the shop, you can do both sides with kind of a book match thing, stick them together while they're really wet, pull them off, and walk away and let it go. It's a whole complement of brushes, most of which are on the table back there, that I use for graining. And I'll give you a couple of, I have a couple of sites. There's some websites you can go to that you can look at. We'll have a whole designated list of, and on that paper, there's a list of suppliers at the bottom. So Suiter's Arts, you can buy most of those different kinds of graining tools and tools for doing any kind of faux finishing, really. Between Suiter's and. This is my preferred wood graining glaze. It's discontinued. It's an oil-based glaze. I haven't ever been able to achieve wood graining with a latex glaze, although I've seen people do it. I was taught old school. So I'll have to actually switch from this as a wood graining glaze to, I think there's a brand named McCluskey's that still makes an oil-based glaze, or I could make my own. You could use a flat varnish because all you really,
No, sorry.
you could use any kind of a flat or low luster varnish. This has just been a great studio finish.
And then
What is
tinted.
a glaze?
Yeah.
It's just
How do you
varnish.
define?
It's a slow drying varnish.
Okay.
So to slow it down, I even add kerosene to it in the wood graining process. Otherwise it goes off too fast and you don't get to do all the manipulation you want.
And that's how you get contouring and all that.
So, and it'll start to dry, the edges will dry, and you can't touch it again. You know, I can't emphasize enough, just walk away. You're gonna get to a point where it's gonna start to dry, and if you touch it again, you'll be able to see every little mark. So. These are universal tinting colors, which are on the list of graining process things there. I used to buy these at Cincinnati Color. They've been out for a long time because of supply issues. There's a company here. I've been ordering mine from California. I work in Los Angeles a lot, and it's still available there because a lot of painters still, and the film industry uses it. I probably had 8 of those racks, and I used to keep them all full when I worked full time. It's the same. Those are the same colorants that you get in the paint store that they tint their paint with. It's just a field kit for tinting things on the field. So
And is it oil-based or?
that'll work in oil and latex. It's a UTC, a universal tinting color.
Oh,
Now, fine art, and if I have the luxury, and I used to have that in a big budget, I would buy Japan colors in oil, which are expensive, but they're more finely ground, and you can get a little better clarity.
I mean, right here, you talk about it. What's Japan colors that they come from Japan?
They're finely ground artist colors in oil.
And what?
And Japan was, I don't know why they call it Japanning. Japanning is another term used for
Yeah.
painting decorative tin and things in the 19th century, this little black stuff with the gold pinstripes, like the mantles. And it would be black Japan. So, and it would
That's
be,
just a name,
yeah.
not coming from Japan. Oh,
No.
it's based in Japan.
although maybe it did somewhere. Really
I don't know where the Japan originally started, but they're Japan colors, finely ground, they're still called Japan colors. So
Uh-huh.
I'm not really sure.
Yeah,
the
they're
etymology.
really
Finely ground, what?
Finely ground artist colors
Oh.
in oil.
Yeah,
So
they're
it would
really
be-
teensy.
And one of the big problems I've had with the paint stores is every color, I used to love Benjamin Moore because the colors didn't have a name, they had a number.
Yeah,
And,
that's right.
And I was used to taking a color rack like this, and I had medium green, light green, raw umber, raw sienna, burnt sienna, Venetian red, you need another permanent red, or bulletin red, violet, some other bright yellows, and it was just like mixing an artist's palette. Now it's like, they're all a little bit off, or they're a little muddy, and the universal tinting colors have gotten a little muddy in there. They're not as finely ground, they stratify. You can't really add water to it to emulsify it. They used to put an extender in there, which was an emulsifier that way you could mix oil colors afterwards. But once you add water to that, then you're putting water in your oil paint. So this is another Benjamin Moore glaze, but it's an acrylic glaze. They still make this, and a lot of people are going to have to go and use it. It's not a polyurethane, which is a big advantage because you can go over it with other things.
So the other alkyd stucco finish was
They just-
technically polyurethane?
No, the alkyd is just a flat varnish or a low luster varnish. And you can make your own glazes. You can make it out of linseed oil and turpentine, and that's really all a lot of that stuff is. So you can make your own glaze. It would be slow drying, so you'd have to add some white spirits or something to it, mineral spirits or something. So, you probably got all a piece of paper with a process here. So, for wood graining, I don't have a base color here, but you use this oil. I use a waterborne finish, semi-gloss. Any kind of good semi-gloss paint. And the reason I use semi-gloss is it holds out a little better when you're putting something over it. You don't want it to bite really good. And a flat paint would definitely bite. The color would bite a little more. And when you add your glaze, which you're adding your color to, colored glaze you're gonna have this, you're gonna have like a brownish, umberish, reddish, whatever glaze that's semi-transparent that you're gonna brush over there. And that would be this. You brush the whole thing out with this. And then you manipulate that with a flogging brush to get to so this is so this is a little different. This is, I actually scanned this off somebody else's website. And this is just a brush out. While the glaze is still wet, they've drawn up in here with a brush or a rag, however they did that to get that peak. They continued with that. They probably put a sealer over this. And then put more glaze on to get it, it's red, much redder. And then they drew in all the other stuff here. So that's just the comb. I ran a comb over that glaze, and I flogged it with a flogging brush, which is
Really like what you picture when you say.
yeah. You take a which glaze on. The comb will give you a suggest. All I need to do is suggest to you that this is wood. Now, I have taken pains to make sure it looks like mahogany. I used to make fun of the wood that people would grain because I'd say, "What's that? Oh, mahogany?" You know, because it's not. The different woods are very, very different. So I put the glaze on. I can comb it. You can see this coming here. I mean, that's
That's
obviously
what they do.
comb. So, and then this brush. Wow, before it goes off, there's a certain point where you're going to be real able to manipulate it very well. You just flop it out. And it will pick up part of it, but not all of it. So it breaks up that.
Just a little bit of.
Now with mahogany, if you want to make some of these other marks, you turn this way, if you've got lines drawn in, and you break it up this way. Then when you're, sometimes you can walk away at this point, but you always want to soften a little bit with a brush. A badge blender.
Against the grain.
It doesn't matter as long as it doesn't. At some point, this will get so hard you won't be able to do anything. But if you just want to soften those hard marks, then you
Yeah.
do with everything, including the grain. That's just a grain and flog finish. And that's your base coat. Now, a lot of these samples you see here are a 1 or 2 step process. They're pretty down and dirty. I put that on there, and while it was still green, I manipulated it, and I let it dry. I put a coat of tinted shellac on it, put a de-wax shellac, a clear, and then if you really want to change the color a little more, you can add tints to your shellac and make it red or do whatever. But here in the meantime, this is a little more fine art process. This was one process. They put a coat of acrylic or clear, and you alternate. You'd have a waterborne ground color. Then you would have an oil-based glaze. You'd seal it again with an acrylic or de-wax shellac seal coat. Then you draw in your other stuff. Do the same process again, removing,
With the waterborne.
You can use waterborne. You want to switch to mediums. You don't want to put another oil base over there because it's going to bite into your oil-based glaze. So you want to get a separation between those things so you get more depth. Shellac is perfect for it because it'll resist everything and it gives a nice clear build. You put another coat of shellac or acrylic finish on it and add a lot of this other stuff. They've added some more glaze and removed a little more. Again, letting all that go through. Put another coat of acrylic or clear on it. And then finally drew in all of these fans. And then, so some of this is like a 5-step process. But you definitely want to alternate from a waterborne to oil-based glaze, to,
Huh.
to waterborne, to oil-based glaze, to waterborne, and then for final coat, I use a lot of seal coat and shellac, because you can go over it with anything. It's a seal coat is a de-waxed shellac, so if I want to go over it at the very end with a waterborne polyurethane or an oil-based varnish, either one, they'll all bond to that.
Mike, I've
Wax
seen
shellac.
shellac online sold as crystals.
Yeah, you can make your own in alcohol. You can buy shellac flakes,
Yeah,
and you can buy different colors of shellac flakes.
right, right.
And that's more of a fine art process. And what I do is I call myself an artisan as opposed to an artist. So I have to exist in the real world that has to be commercially viable.
Right.
And then at the very end, this might be fine and you can put a clear coat over it, but, sometimes when I glaze, it depends on, I got a lot of nice figure here, and came to this, and I put some other dye stains, these nitro dye stains, or Mohawk Furniture Finishing makes these penetrating stains that you can add to seal coat, and you make it red, and you can come to that.
Are you available for, advice after the class?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know who's coming in after us, but I don't even look.
No, I mean, from now on.
From now on, there's a card on the table. We got a few minutes. This process is, they've drawn this in, and I'll give you this. This is a PDF that you can download off the internet. You want to start somewhere with your grain and your figure, and it looks like they've drawn some of that in. But what they also might have done. You can wrap this around a piece of PVC, and they would roll. You can do the same thing with one of each. You roll this on here and drag it, and then roll it again, and it'll make these marks. And after you practice a little bit with one of these, you just got a comb on the other side, just to kind of a down and dirty graining tool.
Where do you get your tools from?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's,
But,
you could Google wood graining tools. A lot of art supply stores have them. This is the same thing. This will give you a roll, and this will either apply or remove, and it will give you a check frame. This will give you the whole thing. Actually put it on a piece of PVC. And roll this, and then maybe drag it and roll it again, and it'll give you alternate kinds of things. And they did the same thing here. They've either drawn it in or they've done use a little roller.
did they take the first, when you first were there, they put like color there and then they start rolling it, get it moved, is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
you want to establish some random
Spots,
points. So
yes.
you're not doing, so it's not all done with your roller. So that you've got something random to do.
And then you're moving there.
And they, later on, they've just drawn this in, or they've taken a pencil grainer, and they've drawn in this stuff. And finally, at the end, it looks like they just drawn this in with a brush, or maybe a big brush that you cut a bunch of bristles out of, or a sponge where you take a sponge and cut it with a scissors and get random, and then just draw that up there. The faster you do it, the more hungover you are, the better it's going to work. Because you won't even want to look at it. You're going to, I'm over this. And then they soften the whole thing with a brush. And you can take that a little farther and put a red glaze over that and get to something very different.
So that bottom one, he appears to have started with white or off-white or gray or whatever that is.
Right.
As opposed to the yellow, yeah.
Right. Your glaze is always, and you're always going to have an option at the end to make it a little redder or a little greener. If you with an overglaze, you can use a glaze with very little color in it, just give it some random stuff. What we did in the film industry is a lot of times when you get all the way to the end, we take a lacquer and seal everything with lacquer, and I put some Japan colors in the lacquer, and then it would give it a raw under the
Yeah.
overlays like oxidation. There's just a lot of layers.
I did this in my closet, which was, we the floors were done in this one closet. I said, well, I want to try this. And so I went to the federal courthouse in Cincinnati, so I would go in with the marble floors or the
Yeah.
and went home and did it, just to see. It turned out looking good. It's easy to clean the floor down, you know?
Right, and the only, like I said, it's trompe l'oeil in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Because all I have to do is
Yeah.
hint that that is wood,
Agreed.
and your brain is gonna fill in everything
Right,
else.
exactly.
You'll testify that it had this and that in it. So, universal color, or, yeah. So you just keep alternating those. You can put as many layers on or as little as you would like. Your finish coat can be whatever you want. You can tint it if you like. I usually like the finish with, the very finish is to use a clear finish so that nothing's going to wear. If anything wears through a little bit, it's not going to matter. The colors for the glazes are universal tinting colors or Japan colors in oil. Mohawk dye stains or nitro dye stains for your shellac or your seal coat, which is a de-waxed shellac. And then I know Rockler Woodworking sells these mix-all tints. I've never used them. And you can use them for acrylic, waterborne. I think you can even use them for alcohol or another universal dye, not as opposed to a tinting color like you would use for paint. So it would be a very clear, you could make a clear glaze out of it, either in waterborne or.
So the mix-alls tend to be more of a dye.
They're a dye.
Yeah.
They're not a. They're made for fine woodworking, really. Rockler Woodworking sells those. And as far as local suppliers, Cincinnati Color was always the best place. They sell graining combs and coloring, and I know they're going to have coloring again. Universal tinting color.
They're still there, they just.
They're on Dalton Avenue, yeah. And Suter's Art Store probably has, or Plaza Art Supplies. If they don't have it, you can order a lot of stuff from there. So, the Miller Brothers store in Norwood used to carry a lot of stuff, and they still carry all the, like Modern Masters, metallic colors and things like that that are pretty good. They're waterborne metallic colors, which are pretty neat because they're true metallics, and that there's metallic in the paint, and you can buy stuff to make it look aged, you can buy copper paint and put a spray on it and make it look like a copper patina.
Does it actually chemically changes it?
Yeah.
What did you call that stuff?
Modern Masters.
Modern Masters, metallic colors?
Yeah.
Cool.
And Miller Brothers in Norwood, Miller Brothers Paint and Wallpaper sells that. A lot of people do. There's a place in Latonia, B&E Decorating, and they sell all that stuff too. Any other questions?
Just wondering if you have any YouTube videos that kind of demonstrate you doing this process?
No, but there's plenty of stuff. I looked online. There were there's a couple of things. Those sites are all, you can take a picture of that and do it. They all have wood graining restoration and stuff. And if you just Google, wood graining restoration, whatever, there's zillions of videos out there now. And that was never available. I mean, when I started doing this kind of stuff, we didn't even have cell phones. So it was, I can't say enough about, I worked in the film industry and I worked in a lot of different cities with a lot of different people. And it just gives you such a wide range of, they do all the same thing you do and they use different materials because they can't get them there or they learn from somebody else. And that exposure and stimulation is just hard to replace.
When you do a piece of work, do you usually work independently, or do you ever have a process where you do some of it and you have a partner that?
You know, I have friends that help me from time to time. I'm semi-retired now, so I do my own. I restore manuals, and I do some other. I'm kind of ADD, so I still do some regular service work. And I got some old customers that want me to rebuild the front of the storefront or something like that. I do some work at the Sign Museum, and I do fabrication on the metal stuff. At the Sign Museum, I got to paint all the facades that run down the street, so all the aged finishes and fake brick and all that stuff. And they're getting ready to do a big addition. I'm all excited.
Where's that?
It's on Monmouth Street in Camp Washington. If you Google American Sign Museum,
Because it used to be it seemed like it used to be in a.
Essex Studios.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
I saw, it was really like one room.
Wow.
So,
So you
on with
just-
that, where
Just
is
pay
it?
and include it.
It's gorgeous.
That's the
No,
easiest.
I'm inspired by artists like this, just seeing them do work. Like,
I didn't want to screw with it. I thought I'd mess it up, so I got professional.
well, now, I love to watch them do it. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I had to paint in the top. I had to match the top stuff, but a lot of that was a cleaning, and then I had to in-paint some of the stuff that was missing.
Yeah, because a lot of the marbling was there, but you couldn't really see it.
Yeah.
And you just cleaned it, and there it was. It
Yeah.
was beautiful. Yeah.
Now, I found this PDF online, and she does a really good job of describing how to do things. And faux painting, you know, in the 19th century, the stuff I used to research would be a lot of painters and decorators had to imitate wood and stone, so they did wood graining. It was very down and dirty. It usually wasn't like the Taft Museum had wood grain panels, which were redone. They had a company come in and clean and repair and regrain a lot of stuff that had been painted over the years. So that was a little more fine art, but a lot of stuff was just down and dirty like this. I mean, that's all a painted grain finish. And as far as you know, that's like a pine, whatever, but it's really, it's just
like
painted.
you
So
can
they
see the
used,
grading comb.
yeah, they combed it, they drew in some of that. It looks like they had a little rocker roller.
But does that have the shellac removed from it?
I didn't do anything to it. I went up to the shoe store and took it out of the building yesterday. It's hanging in the building, so. But this woman describes a lot of stuff. As you can see, I stole her.
Yeah, who is this? I didn't see that.
Her name is, that's the actual,
Bernice something or other.
yeah, you try to pronounce it, I'm not going to.
Or did it
Krins, C-R-I-J-N-S. That's an umlaut or something there, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think that the title is the title of the PDF, and it's downloadable. I just clicked on it and downloaded it. She does she describes how a lot of that stuff is done, a good process, and some painted floors. Actually, I read that this is, the middle section there is done with your feet.
Excellent. Oh,
Wow.
They call it, it's called children's foot finish or something like that. It is, it's a German or whatever name. These are some old stuff they found in a closed-in panel or doorway or something.
Wow.
so
And then a lot of stuff you'll see, they'll go all the way into doing gold leaf and everything, so which I've done a little bit of, but it's another tedious. I don't need that many disciplines. Like sample board there, putting stuff back. That was a pretty decent website.
I worked for somebody once, and when the issue between making a sample panel of some marbleizing thing to show the client, and then what it looks like on the wall, it's like the sample, they'd always be like, it doesn't look like the sample. And it's like, I don't know how, you have to just, like do the sample with your knee or something to make it not look so,
Right.
Careful or something.
Well, a lot of times the
Really
same
don't
person
look-
isn't doing it. So my solution to that was always, and I worked with a lot of fussy Hollywood designers, you keep that sample and you make them initial it. So that when you go back and the color matches right and everything. But absent that, I would repaint the sample. And they're not going to remember, So it's your sample, If I can't do an initial, it's fine.
That's good.
And you laugh, but it's totally cynical. But there's another PDF on grain painted furniture, which was pretty interesting. American grain painted furniture. That had a lot of furniture techniques, which are usually not. Everything I did had to look like it really did in the real world, working for film. And usually I'm doing that. Furniture is a little different. It's a little more fanciful, and decorations in people's houses. You go from one step to the other. And
Basically works that.
now it's a mural instead of a process. Mine was mostly real world recreations of something or aging something to make it look old. And this company is really, found this company online, John Canning, and they're a huge restoration company. They do all kinds of wood graining. They have I found the whole, there's a mixture. All this is wood grain. These are all wood grain things, which I worked on a couple of churches. Ecclesiastical work is another nice fine art niche.
What was that last thing you said?
Ecclesiastical work, doing work
right.
in, you can usually get a donor too. John Canning, you'll find their website, and they've got a lot of reservation techniques. This is the Mohawk stain that I add to seal coat or shellac. Use it very sparingly, but it comes in colors. You can get blue, green, artist colors if you want to tint things one direction or another, or brown, and that way you can make your seal coat, your varnish, have a tint to it that will age you and let you age things and manipulate them.
It's no hot wood.
They what?
No hot wood.
Mohawk.
Finishing products, maybe?
Yeah, I can't enlarge
It's
this
okay.
one. Mohawk. Ultra penetrating stain.
And where do you say you get that?
Cincinnati Color has that. Cincinnati Color Company.
That would be sort of instead of the mix all tint, those are both
Yeah.
universal tinting colors.
Well, this is all alcohol or
Oh,
oil based. So
okay.
the mix-alls are universal that you can use. Rockler's really very big on using waterborne finishes, which I never really used.
Who what?
Rockler Woodworking.
Oh.
They're in Sharonville, but you can Google Rockler Woodworking and you can order a little palette
And
of
they're
color.
big on using waterborne, is that what you said?
Yeah, they use a lot of waterborne stuff.
Because of
Or
the
shellac.
environmental
Yeah,
stuff.
I guess probably everybody's headed that way because of, environmental issues with the toxic substances that I use. So, any other questions?
Very interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, there's books back there, like I said, if you want to look, you can look at tools. You got a minute here, I think.